Welcome everybody to tonight's meeting of SABR's Elysian Fields chapter. My name is Donna Muscarella, and I'm the chapter president coming to you from Northern New Jersey. I'm honored to welcome tonight our guests, Dick Perez and Marq Evans. Dick is an iconic sports artist known for depicting the history of baseball through love transferred to canvas. His masterful talents led him to be named the official artist of the National Baseball Hall of Fame for over 20 years. He's also the official artist of the Philadelphia Phillies. Perez's work continues to bring smiles to the faces of many a baseball card and baseball postcard collector, thanks to his creations for Donruss, Topps, and Perez Steel Galleries. Marq Evans is an award-winning independent filmmaker and creative entrepreneur. His debut feature film, The Glamour and the Squalor, won top prize at film festivals around the world and was named one of the top 20 music documentaries of all time by American Songwriter. Another of his films, Clay Dream, premiered at the 2021 Tribeca Film Festival to critical acclaim and has had an extensive theater run in the summer of 2022. Thanks to Mark's son Jude's love of baseball cards, the seed was planted for the making of the Diamond King. Mark pulled out his childhood cards and came across a bunch of Diamond Kings that he had collected. That led to a curiosity about Dick Perez, a discovery of his entire body of work, and a desire to tell Dick's story. And so, here we are today to celebrate Dick, Mark, and the video-on-demand release of The Diamond King. Welcome, Mark and Dick.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What are you needing us for? You've got it all.
Oh, no. Believe me, you guys are the superstars here. You guys are the superstars here. So to kind of kick things off, I want to turn back the clock a little bit. Not all the way back. And Jason Schwartz, feel free to jump in on this if you want, because this is an important, fun part of the story. So back in the first half of 2023, so almost 2 years ago, my phone went off and I got a text from Jason, which is not out of the ordinary for that to happen. And he said something like, "You collected Diamond Kings as a kid, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, there's this project and maybe you might want to be a part of it." And he told me about Mark and Dick and the idea of this film. And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds really cool." So he said, there may be some on-screen stuff. And, those who know me know I'm not shy. I'm not going to, it's not like I'm seeking the camera. I'm usually behind it as a photographer, but I'm sure, let's do this. And more importantly, an opportunity to celebrate Dick Perez, whose work I adore and who is an inspiration for me in my artwork. Absolutely. So move ahead to, I guess the national was in July that year, July of 23. And Jason and I went to the national together, and we were like two kids. It was the funniest thing. We got there early. We're like, "Oh, there's gonna be a line. We better get there early and get online so that we can meet Dick Perez." And we round the corner, and the line had already started, and people were already meeting Dick. And we're like, and Jason's like, "He's here." And it was like, we were like the two goofy 6-year-olds. And we saw Mark. We said a quick hello. We got in line, and Mark very wonderfully captured me fangirling to the nth degree. And it was, and funny enough, and I didn't realize this until I watched the film the second time, there's actually a shot in the movie of me taking pictures of Jason meeting Dick. So I was like, "Hey, Donna, photographer, made it into the film." So it was kind of funny. So that was 2 years ago, and now here we are and celebrating. We got to see the in-between at SABR 52 with that sneak preview. And now we're here to celebrate, and it's out for everybody to see. It made its video on demand debut um, last Friday, right? So it is now available on Apple, Amazon, Google, and Kinema for rent or purchase at a very reasonable price. And so I hope everybody has seen it already. If you haven't, it's Marq, is there an end run, or is this an open run on those platforms?
Yeah, so on those platforms, it should be on there forever, essentially. And just to kind of backtrack, yeah, that was the first national that I'd ever been to. Dick had been to a couple before in his capacity as an artist and a painter in the card community. But we were both just like blown away by that event, the hugeness of it with 100,000 I think people there, they said. And yeah, that scene essentially of Donna and Jason, and there's a couple other faces and names I recognize, maybe from the national, but certainly from SABR when I was out there last year. Making it into the film, and I love that scene, just being able to show an audience that may or may not be familiar with Dick Perez, just how much he and his work meant to people, and continues to mean to people. So that was a great opportunity. I think that was the first time that I met Donna or Jason, and Jason, was somebody I reached out to really early on in the making of this film because I saw online, I was kind of lurking on social media, not part of this community, but seeing this community. And Jason seemed to be connected with everybody, and loved by everybody. So I reached out to him and said, maybe you could help connect me. Here's the project. Are you interested in, kind of being part of the team and connecting me to some of these others? And he jumped right in. So yeah, we ended up showing the film 1 year later, was a sneak peek of the film. So last year in July in Cleveland at the National. So we were back at the National 1 year later, showed it there, and then showed it in Minneapolis at the Saber 52 convention. And then we had a couple other sneak peeks. We had one in Cooperstown that Dick and I went to in I think September, which was a great experience. And then in November we showed again a version of it. I keep saying that at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City, which was a great experience. But along the way, um, I remember watching it at these sneak peeks and the music wasn't done yet. We had maybe 20% of the music was done. Everything else was temp music. So for those of you that saw it in Minneapolis, if any of you were there, which I think some of you were, um, that wasn't the final version. It was never going to be the final version because of the music component. My composer, Andrew Joslin, was still working on the music. Um, but I also was watching and I thought, there's probably a better version of this film that's a couple minutes shorter. There was a couple moments I just knew like maybe kind of went on a little too long. But as I'm doing these screenings, I thought, but I'm not going to cut it. I like it. I like it as it is. But then that was part of the value of having some of these sneak peeks. Nobody said anything. Nobody said like, oh, that's, it's long. It should be a couple minutes shorter, but you can kind of feel it. And so ultimately I did decide, the best version of this film is a few minutes shorter. So there was a little bit of rearranging, cutting a little bit down, and then the final music, and then we world premiered it at the Palm Springs International Film Festival in January. So that was the first kind of final screening. It won the Best of Fest award. Don, I think you're going to ask about this later, but I'll just go ahead and mention it now while I'm
That's
talking
okay.
about it. That was the first time that we showed the film to an audience that wasn't just baseball lovers or even like baseball card people. So we kind of wondered, what will the reaction be? And it won Best of Festival. It had a great reaction because Dick's story goes beyond just the baseball and the art. That's a very compelling part of it. That's what attracted me, and that's probably why people are going to show up to the film. But there's so much beyond that. So that was great. But even then, there was a few tweaks made before the final release. So the version that is out now on Apple and Amazon and all these platforms, is the final version. The first time it's been the final version. I don't, I'd be interested to know if some of you have seen that version or not. Um, and it will be out forever. That said, for opening week, which is right now,
Mhm.
there's a couple special things that we're doing. One is this giveaway that if anybody rents it or buys it, before the end of this week, before May 2nd, so the opening week, and sends proof of purchase to an email address proof at actually no, I'm sorry, Donna, you've got it. TDK proof
tdkproof@gmail.com.
at gmail.com. We made one specifically for Saber members because part of this giveaway is only for you. So if you send it to TDK uh, proof,
Proof.
TDK proof, which Donna has that info, um, at gmail.com, we'll automatically send you JPEGs of all 405 of the Diamond Kings that Dick created from 1982 to 1996. And then also, for those of you that purchased it, so that's for renting or purchasing. For those of you that purchase it, which is $14.99. No, I'm sorry, it's
It's different on different
yeah.
platforms.
Well,
Like
I think
it's
it's
$9.99 on
well, I think
Google.
9.99 on Google is the standard definition. So HD
Oh, I gotcha.
is
Sorry.
12.99. So it's 12.99 to own it. So you'll have the movie. But then that also enters you into a giveaway, and I think Donna made a little graphic that I can show here. Um, so the collection of Diamond Kings would come if you buy or rent, but if you buy, you're entered into a contest for a print of the first night game at Ebbets Field, which is actually how we open the movie. From the very beginning of the movie, we kind of open on this amazing painting by Dick. And so I've gotten a print of that, which we used, which we printed for the movie. And so we want to give that away to somebody from Saber, somebody from the, that's on this call right now. And then we thought, like, let's try to make a second print available. So Donna and I came up with something kind of fun where if if we get 84 to celebrate Dick's 84 years on this planet, if we get 84 people that submit proof of rental or purchase, then we'll make this Hank Aaron available too. So another print that I've got here that we printed out for the making of the movie. So hopefully, not only you will be inspired to rent or buy and send in proof of purchase, but encourage others too, so we can unlock this, which is one of my favorite pieces of Dick's work. I love that Hank Aaron so much. So anyway, I've been rambling for 5 minutes, but wanted
No,
to share some of that information.
no, that was very important part of the rambling because I want to make sure that as many people as possible can be inspired to see this film. And I really do believe that even people who are not baseball fans will get something out of this film because it's not just a baseball story. I mean, it really is. It's a story about immigration, and I know some of this is in some of the press that you've pushed out there for the film, but it's a story about family. It's a story about living your dream. It's a story about so many different things, and baseball art just happens to be the vehicle for it. So, you know, scream every way, which way you can, everybody, to get people to watch this because
Yeah,
it
I
really
think
is spectacular.
in a nutshell, you've got somebody in Dick that had something happen at a very, very young age that provided a pretty large amount of adversity and an obstacle in his life, and he still ended up achieving something that is the very, very, very top of his profession. Not only as a baseball artist, by the way, but
Yes.
as an artist in general. I mean,
Hmm.
because the Diamond Kings themselves corresponded with the boom in baseball cards when millions and millions and millions of cards were being printed during that 15 years he did Diamond Kings. Um, about 1.5 billion of those cards were reproduced of Dick's cards, just the Diamond Kings during that era, which I know, Dick, that you're not the number one most reproduced artist of all time because that is somebody that did a stamp of Queen Elizabeth that was reproduced like tens of billions of times, but I haven't found anybody that is second place. You might be, which is just a mind-boggling thing to think about, the amount of art, and it's all in the style of Dick Perez, signed by Dick Perez. Whereas
Yeah.
that the Queen stamp it's really kind of anonymous, it's just this
Hmm.
stamp. So that's I continue to be fascinated by his story even beyond after the film is made. I mean, that's something I kind of learned after making the film, so it's not in the film,
Yeah.
but it's just amazing to think about.
So before we talk more about the film, and we are going to do that, and by the way, everybody, there will be opportunity for Q&A at the end. So please hold your questions. I promise we'll get to them. So I want to jump back in time a little bit and talk about how each of you got hooked on baseball. Different time frames, but interesting stories nonetheless, I'm sure.
Dick, why don't you start?
Well, it was a way to have friends. I lived in Harlem, and there were all kinds of baseball games, stickball, punchball, softball, hardball, and just it just served as a way of getting, even though I didn't know the language fully, the game was enough. And that's when I just became infatuated with the game by by itself. And we didn't have TVs then, at least my family didn't. And every Sunday I would go to a neighbor's house in the apartment house. She let me in to see Joe DiMaggio and maybe an early Mickey Mantle at one time. So, it was just a way of getting familiar with what my new surroundings were all about. I was about
When
maybe 8 years old.
when you played, did you have a favorite position? Or you were just happy to be on the field and out with kids?
Yeah, kind of like that. I was a lefty, so other than an outfield, pitching, or first base, that was it. And I became a good first baseman, but I mean, what do they do other than catch a ball? But I didn't have good enough arm to pitch or to be in the outfield, although I can run down flies, I remember. So first base.
First base. Interesting.
There,
Yeah, I
there,
mean,
there's a
as a lefty, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no left. Yeah, it's a big handicap.
Yeah, that's yeah. But hey, Don Mattingly did it well, right?
So did a lot of others, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Mickey Mantle half of his time.
Yeah. Poor Mickey
there's a
Mantle.
funny story in
Oh,
the film of Dick. Maybe it's the 14-year-old season, I think it is, that the team starts taking their own batting averages finally. That wasn't something they'd been doing. And that's when he learned that he was batting 188. And maybe that dream of being a professional baseball player and taking over for Mickey Mantle in center field maybe wasn't going to come to fruition.
I knew I didn't like math. Once I learned math, I figured out my button, forget it.
that's it. No more math. Well, but interesting. I mean, there is some mathematical aspect to some portions of art, right? Or did you just
Expand on that a little bit.
Well, I'm just thinking like you were in the film where you developing the grids for the layout of the film, of the layout of a piece of artwork, right? There's
Oh,
tiny
yeah.
mathematical bits to that.
Yeah. They're
Yeah,
proportions to figure out. Sure. There's some math, but
but not a lot.
not a lot.
Yeah. I mean, if you were better at the math than you were at the art, the world wouldn't be as great a place because we wouldn't have you as an artist. So I'm glad that the math didn't
Well,
take
yeah,
front stage for you. So what about you, Mark? How did the game catch you?
I don't have a distinct memory, although I just remember playing baseball from my early memories. And it was my favorite sport. I played baseball, played basketball, played soccer. Baseball and soccer season was usually the same time, so very quickly chose baseball. And like Dick, had dreams of being a Major League Baseball player. Um, but it was probably when I was 8 and Ken Griffey Jr. came on the scene for the Mariners that I really fell in love with it because that was the first like superstar. I was a fan, but before then, I remember I really liked Jim Presley was a third baseman that the Mariners had. I grew up in Washington State, so I was a Mariners fan. So I liked Jim Presley, but and Alvin Davis was kind of the first. He's Mr. Mariner. But it wasn't until Griffey came along that I just totally fell in love with the game, and that's all I wanted to do was play baseball. So I played through high school. Um, my kind of claim to fame is we won the state championship in the highest classification, and I led the league in ERA. So I was, decent enough pitcher, had some small school opportunities to pitch, and um, had some arm issues and decided to just hang them up at that point and go about my life. But You know, it's always been my favorite sport. I kind of got away from it a little bit, like before my son was born, and then even when he was born, it, you know, it for several years of his life, and it wasn't until he was, I think, 8. He wasn't really into sports at all. And so I kind of was just getting away from it a little bit. And then being Washington State people, I went to Washington State University. In 2018, we had a quarterback for the football team named Gardner Minshew that kind of lit college football on fire. And it was this amazingly exciting season for WCU Cougar football. And so my son just like got swept up in that. And all of a sudden he loves sports and he loves football. And then the Mariners a couple years later get Julio Rodriguez and we make the playoffs for the first time, and so he's hooked. He, you know, and so we've had season tickets ever since. So that kind of changed everything, and that of course, you know, just brought me fully back into it, which you know, you kind of alluded to that at the top of this conversation that led to, you know, him collecting baseball cards, me pulling out my collection, rediscovering the Diamond Kings, and just kind of feeling like, you know, transported back to my youth of collecting those cards and being curious about the artist. And now here we are, you know, almost 3 years later from
Yeah.
I think that was June of 2022. So in June, that'll be 3 years from when that happened, pulling out those cards and reaching out to Dick and starting a conversation about, you know, making this movie.
So, and it seems like the time flew, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And even though, you know, 2.5, call it years to make a film, probably, you know, it is a long time. It sounds like a long time. My previous feature films were 5-year projects. So it is like really fast to make it, and stopping, you're waiting for things to happen. You're, you know, so it's not like it's 2.5 years of like every day 12 hours, you know, working on the thing. But from start to finish, yeah, 2.5 hours. But it does feel like time flew. I mean, Dick and I got along along with his wife Lou and my cinematographer Jason Rourke. I mean, it would be Jason and I was like our whole team. So we'd come to Brooklyn, which is where most of the shooting took place, and you know, got to know Dick well very quickly, and you know, many dinners with him and his wife after we were done shooting. And so this, you know, this friendship and, you know, love for him and his family, you know, started. And so yeah, it all felt like it started and was done, even though it was 2.5 years, very very quickly, because it was just a fun process the entire time.
So you again coming at it from completely different angles, but can you share with us a little bit of insight into your love of baseball art? And I mean, Mark, you talked about what got you back into the baseball cards, but you know, Dick, you went from enjoying the game on the field to, you know, yourself to make friends to becoming this amazing world-renowned baseball artist. So how did you connect those dots? And then Mark, when did it become for you an appreciation? And we talked about this a little in the intro. Um, an appreciation of baseball cards as art and having everything kind of come full circle.
Yeah, Dick, you want to start?
Well, my getting involved in actual painting of figures, baseball figures, came about when I decided that what I wanted to do was be a graphic designer, because there's no way that I would have an easier way by being an illustrator. At least with as a designer, I could be working for an agency, for a printer, in other places. And so I designed, I had a friend who became the general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles, and he had me design some booklet programs, things like that, and do some painting here and there. And the Phillies caught a glimpse of my work, and they had just gotten rid of their advertising agency, and they needed somebody who knew a little bit more about advertising. And I knew about advertising, printing, design. I've just learned these things. And so I was designing yearbooks and programs and things like that, and farming out the illustrations. And I said to myself, why don't I do these illustrations? There's such a ballet to this sport. And so many different, I mean, you got fielding, you got hitting, you got running, you got catching, you got pitching. All these are different movements, and they're poetic in some ways. So I started doing my own illustration, and I met. I mean, the story is filled with more things, but I met Frank Steele, who was a collector, and he knew of me because of the Phillies and the Eagles. And I I still like in the film, would state that I caught a glimpse of his collection. He was a big collector of his excuse me, Island and Gitta cards. And I said, they don't do art in cards anymore. It's just photographs. Even the art that was in the 50s, early 50s that Topps did, they were art, but they still look like photographs. The goal was to make them look like photographs. Of course, that as rosters grew, art making painting players was not, when they're trying to make them look like photographs, you might as well take the photograph. So anyway, I just thought that there was a possibility that baseball can play a big part in, for me anyway, in illustrating the game. And he was connected to the Hall of Fame. He knew the president. They were both Wall Street people. And he proposed that because the Hall of Fame did, the only cards of the players in their collection of inductees are these plaque cards. There's a picture of the plaque, but nothing that would be unified or be consistent art. And I looked at Allen and Ginter historically, and I looked at baseball historically, and I said, what would happen if I would do every Hall of Famer to be the same style and manner? Do you think the Hall of Fame would like that? He said, yeah. I said, so anyway, he proposed it. They liked it. At first they didn't want to commit too much to it, and they didn't commit any money to it. But eventually they saw how well they were selling, and sure enough, they joined in. So it just went from there. I started doing other things. Perez Steele started honoring the past card designs, like the Turkey Reds and the Celebration, which was another card design of that era. And I had fun along the way.
And we've had fun looking at them and collecting them. I'm not sure how many people in the room collect the Perez Steels, but I'm 15 cards away from a full run of the 14 series set. And it's been fun hunting them down, and I'll get those last 15 and then move on to the greatest moments and try and do that complete set of that. So thank you for creating all of that. Marq?
Yeah, so I was unaware of all the Perez Steel cards going into this well, not really going into this project, but before I started researching. I knew Dick from I knew the Diamond Kings, and I didn't know the artist. So when I rediscovered them with my son, when I was collecting them, I loved the cards, I loved the art. I mean, those were my favorite cards, were the Diamond Kings, because they were so different. But also it was more about like, oh, it's King Griffey Jr., it's Bo Jackson done in this way that I hadn't seen before. I don't remember back then ever saying, who's the artist behind these. I don't remember ever having that thought, but that was my first thought 2 years ago when I rediscovered them, was who's the artist. And so that led me to Dick's website. And if all I would have learned there was, here was the guy that did these Diamond Kings, I would have loved reading about it for however long, and that probably would have been it. That would have been the end of my curiosity. But on his website, if anybody's ever been there, I mean, you can get lost for days on it, which I did. And that's when I found out that, he was the official artist of the Baseball Hall of Fame and the Phillies, and he's got a bio with this wonderful story. And then I also saw that he had done literally thousands of baseball paintings spanning the whole history of the game. And so that's when I immediately was like, oh, there's a bigger story here where we can tell his story, but also kind of a history of baseball through his work. And that's when I saw the Perez Steel cards for the first time. So I was unaware of those, and you can't see this shelf over here, but I've been picking off a lot of signed Perez Steel cards, over these last couple of years because I fell in love with those. And so I've always been a fan of art, love going to art museums and things of that nature. And I know, Jason Schwartz has been writing kind of a recurring column for SI Collectibles about Diamond Kings, and I'm paraphrasing, but something to the effect of these were the first cards where somebody said, hang it in the Louvre. And so it was when I was doing that research, um, again, loving the Diamond Kings, discovering the Perez Steel cards and just being blown away by them. And right around the same time, I mean, maybe even a little bit before that, and this is just kind of great coincidence, I started becoming aware of some of the Topps artists that they had a couple projects, right? Project 70 and then 2020. I think those were like two different. So maybe the year 2020 and then was it Project 70?
Yeah,
Where they
2020
had,
and then 70. Yeah.
yeah, and so they had, so that would have been those came out a little bit before. So maybe I can't remember if I caught those right when they came out, or maybe I didn't discover them until I started researching this project, but loved a lot of those cards too and started buying those. And then discovering, the work that Jason's done with the glitter cards, and Donna, your work, and seeing that there's also this kind of indie sports card community as well too, and I was really attracted to all that stuff. So all that kind of was happening at the same time, and it to me was just very exciting, like this baseball art that I all of a sudden was everywhere, and so that got me more excited again to pursue this.
So it's gotta be, I mean, I know for me being able to say this now, I would imagine that the same applies to both of you as artists, to be able to take your creative talents and use them professionally has to be like one of the greatest blessings ever. I mean, being pop is the most awesome, right? But being able to creatively do what is in your veins that you love to do, and then doubly for you, Marq, to be able to use your art to tell an artist's story must be just so fantastic. And then Dick, to have an artist want to tell your story is just got to be, I'm just thinking about all these great connections that are all just art.
Right. Connections are the key word for my career. I mean, there was every connection led to another connection that led me to where I am today. I just want to say a special hi to Jason. Jason, I read your Diamond King article today, and it was, as usual, really, really great. So I just wanted to get that. I recognize you.
I appreciate it.
So, and also, I want to express the honor that I got from getting the Burdick Award. I had my boarding pass and everything to go to Indianapolis, and I got hit with some pain that I couldn't. I had to cancel that trip. But I am very flattered by it, and it's an important thing for me because I've always loved SABR. Frank Steele was the one that put me into SABR when I had questions about certain things like why are the A's playing the Phillies in a regular season game? I mean, they never played each other in the World Series. And I wrote SABR, and they could tell by the chest protector that the umpire had that it was one of the games that they played every year. They had a special game that they played against each other, both Philadelphia teams. But that and a lot of other things that I had questions on. I think the way to go is SABR, because they're going to have the answer. I'm going to be correct in everything I do. So I really appreciate that. But where was
Well, I should have. I know. I'll tell you where you were, but what I should have included in the intro was SABR Elysian Fields chapter member Dick Perez, because Dick is still a member of SABR, and I'm honored to have you as a member of our chapter. So you were saying about connections and how important connections are, and one thing led to another, and Frank Steele pointed you to SABR, so another connection
Right, another
aspect.
connection, and then the key. I mean, the luck is there. I mean, it's luck, it's fortuity, whatever. What you the part you play in it is taking advantage of it and working hard while you have that new step that you've gained by being connected. So you still need to work hard, and you still need to produce quality. And it went well with all the steps that I climbed in my career.
I'll add
Producing
to that too. Just
quality,
one of the many
definitely, yeah.
things that I was inspired by making this project and working with Dick was watching him work. Even now, when he's done everything that he has to do, um, during the making of this film, he made new paintings, and there were never any real deadlines. But in his mind, there were. It's like, this is when Mark said we should have it by, and he hit every one of those deadlines. And any time we were going to work on, a certain interview or scene, he's there early. And so watching his professionalism and how he continued just to follow through, and whatever he said he was going to do is what he was going to do was awesome to watch. And there, I mean, there was a lot, and then a lot of things that I was inspired by and learned from him, and just watching him with his wife. He's been married for what 55 plus years now, and that's the kind of marriage that my wife and I were at 19, and aspire to that. So it was just great to be able to spend so much time with him and watch him, both as a professional and just as a human being as well too. And yeah, I mean, Donna, you asked the question just about like, creating art. I think I am attracted to stories about artists of some kind. Like my first film was a radio DJ, when you don't really think of the art there, but there is this, like, he was curating the music, which I think curation is an art, especially now, that he was putting on the radio, and he was basically choosing the music that was going to define a generation, essentially. And then I did a film called Clay Dream about Will Vinton, who was the godfather of claymation, clay animation. His story, kind of his rise and fall. So I think there is something about the artists, especially the ones like in Dick's case, that opportunity to maybe expose an artist to a larger audience. I mean, we know that the baseball community, and certainly the baseball card community, is familiar with him, but hoping that this film can introduce his work and his story to a much larger audience. I mean, that to me is like the most exciting thing and the most important thing, really. Hopefully people, love the movie and love the work that I'm doing, but my goal is to do that in a way to show off his work as something that, I'm grateful for and a huge fan of myself.
Well, how about if we show off both of your works right now with a little clip from the film?
Yeah, I've got a clip up here. So this is a scene we shot a lot. It's around the Negro Leagues history, Dick's impact on that. So it features an interview with Bob Kendrick, president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And one component of this film that is weaved in and out is a on-camera narration by an actor named John Ortiz. You may know the name. If you don't know the name, you'll probably know the face. He's been in things like, most recently, he was in started in a show called Bad Monkey. That was a big show on Apple. He's in a show on Netflix right now called The Madness. 2 years ago, he was in American Fiction, which was up for the Oscars. He's been in Transformers and the Fast and the Furious franchise as well too. So his credits go on and on and on. But he's also a huge baseball fan, and I had a connection with him through a mutual friend, and so he is our on-camera narrator, and he's surrounded by part of it was an excuse to show off more of Dick's work. So he has four paintings at all time, projections of Dick's painting behind him every time he comes on. So you'll see John here, Bob Kendrick, and a lot of Dick's work here in this scene as well. All right, so I will share this. Everybody see that okay?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
For many years, people did not want to talk about the Negro Leagues. There were those who were ashamed of it, and others who simply did not want to acknowledge its existence. Between the late 19th century, after the collapse of the Reconstruction, and April 15, 1947, the day Jackie Robinson played his first game for the Brooklyn Dodgers, there was more than half a century of African-American baseball that was all but lost to history. And what a game that was. Some of the greatest players in baseball history barnstormed from town to town, entirely unnoticed by white America. Oscar Charleston was a powerful hitter and breathtakingly fast base runner, who, according to one contemporary, could actually smell where the ball was going to be hit. Cool Papa Bell was the fastest player of his time, or probably any time. Satchel Paige said he once gave up a line drive up the middle to Bell, and he quickly turned to see the ball hit Cool Papa in the butt as he slid into second base. Martin the Eagle could play every position on the diamond with equal brilliance. They used to say his only weakness was that he couldn't play two positions at the same time. There were so many more great players, and they were being lost to history.
The Black Diamond, Jose Mendez, Willie El Diablo Wells, SABR, Willard Brown, that man. We look at the Negro Leagues as an art form. The way they played the game was artistic, and Dick's word brought them to life. He brought such honor and dignity to a story that had not been treated in an honorable and dignified manner. Dick has done what American historians have failed to do, and that was to acknowledge this chapter of baseball and Americana. He filled a void. Dick has helped people remember these heroes of the Negro Leagues. Ray Dandridge, Wilbur Bullet Rogan, the Gobbler Norman Turkey Stearns, Pistol Pete Hill.
I had to invent a lot of that. So most of my Negro League action paintings are invented. That's one of my favorite parts of it. Finding these gems that I can create images that nobody's ever seen before.
All right. It goes on, but we'll cut it there.
I loved what the president of the Negro League Museum said. I mean, he hit it right on the nose. I intended to make them just as much art as the other Hall of Famers before they inducted Black Hall of Famers. So he hit it right on the. I loved meeting him. I really liked him right away, and I think maybe my affinity for it is that I was raised in Harlem, and most of the kids I played with were Negro, blacks, and they were the better players. So when you grow up and you see the Yankees then, which I was a fan of, or the Dodgers with one or two, you wondered what was going on, because I really didn't counter racism or anything like that. I mean, when I was little, and I think that they were probably my most fun and accomplishments. So I'm so happy about that.
Yeah, that was that interview too with Bob Kendrick was the last one that we did. It was he was on my list of somebody that I wanted to interview, knowing Dick's contribution to a lot of the Negro Leagues history, and with the postcards and portraits and some of those paintings you see in there, as well as the inclusion in some of them in Donruss. Jason, you'll know the set, the Hall of Fame Heroes, I think, which was the first introduction for a lot of collectors to any of these players. As Bob says, they were being lost to history. So, but I didn't really have a connection to Bob. And then Joe Posnanski, the terrific sports writer, writer of Baseball 100, which, is one of my favorite baseball books. We ended up getting him on board to write the narration. So the narration that John Ortiz performs was written by Joe Posnanski, a producer of mine, Michelle Quisenberry. Probably recognize that last name. She was cousins with Dan Quisenberry. Dan Quisenberry and Joe Posnanski had a good relationship before he passed away, and so they had met through years ago. And so she put me in touch with Joe. Joe thought we would want him for like an on-camera interview, is what he assumed, because he's done a lot of that for documentaries. But we proposed this different idea of writing narration that an actor was going to kind of perform on camera, not just like a voice. And so he really loved that idea. And then and so we were working together on that. And then I remember asking him, I feel like it's missing a voice. Maybe Bob Kendrick would do an interview, and they're very close friends. And within like 20 minutes, we had an interview scheduled in Kansas City at the museum there.
To see Joe and Bob Kendrick together that's a storytelling duo that
they can talk. They can talk. Yeah,
they can talk. I ran into them when I was up in Cooperstown for Buck O'Neill, and my primary reason for going sentimentally was for Gil Hodges' induction to the Hall of Fame. But I was thrilled that Buck O'Neill was going in as well, and they were there to celebrate Buck. And I happened to catch them at the right time, and we got to chat for a bit. And wow, you want to talk about walking away with your head spinning with baseball. They just come at you with amazing stories, stories.
It's great. Yeah. And somebody will know the title. It's escaping me right now, but the book that Joe wrote about Buck and kind of him and Buck and Bob kind of were on a tour together almost across the country. The Soul of Baseball. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah. I didn't read that until I was going to Kansas City to do the interview with Bob. I read it. You can read it in like 2 days if you're like, which you probably will, because it's just such a great read. And I think that was when they met. I think Joe and Bob met during the making of that book, and because Bob was kind of like the liaison between Joe and Buck O'Neill. And I think that's just such a great book that would actually make for a really great scripted film as well.
Well, from your mouth, hey, maybe you could make that happen. I don't know.
Maybe.
Could be. So I just wonder, how closely does the final product match your initial vision? And it's for both of you, because right, Mark, I'm sure as the creator of the film, you kind of had an idea in mind. But then Dick, when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to make a film about you and about baseball history, like how closely did the initial thought and the final product align?
For me, really closely, like in a way that I hadn't necessarily experienced before. I mean, there's always discoveries. Like, you've got to go into a project with a vision, because that's going to form how you ask questions in an interview, who you interview. So you've got to you've always got to come in with this idea, but then of course be ready to go down different paths depending on what happens. But we had this idea for the on-camera narration, showing off more work. I didn't know that we'd get Joe Posnanski. I didn't know we'd get John Ortiz, but that was an idea. And I'd done enough research by the time I had this vision of Dick's story that I knew that there, I didn't know necessarily, and Dick, I don't think we had talked about this originally, that it would get as personal in some ways that it ended up being. Like his love story with his wife Lou wasn't something that we talked about, but I start getting to spend some time with them, and I'm like, well, that's going in. They've got what a great story. I love their story. Again, like I said, I strive for, and I remember being like, well, I've got to interview Lou, his wife. And so I asked, that's got to be part of the story. And I remember asking Dick, like, hey, what do you think about me interviewing Lou? And he was like, well, I'm not going to ask her, you ask her, because she had kind of made it clear, like, she would prefer not to be on camera and everything. And so we had a laugh about that, and to her credit, she was just like, sure, if that's what you want. And also to Dick's credit, anytime I asked anything, because he's an artist, he doesn't want anybody telling him, you know, what to do or not do. He gave me free creative freedom everywhere. And that was so great to work that way. That's not always the case. It sometimes can be very hard. And people, subjects want to control more, but what they want to control oftentimes has nothing to do with the actual story. It's maybe, you know, they don't want you to use something that's really powerful because they think their hair looks weird or whatever. And so it was great to have that freedom. And we had this trust. So I think Dick also knew that I wasn't gonna, you know, go out and do something that wasn't what, you know, the vision that we ultimately had together. Um, and then there was, you know, I'm not going to give away where this went because I think for those of you that haven't seen it, to me it's kind of like very much like the heartbeat of this film is a story about Dick and his mother. Wasn't something that we had talked about and wasn't something that really I noticed until we were like halfway through, that there was just these conversations during our interviews that he would speak about his relationship with his mother, and I just kind of out of curiosity explored that a little bit more, and it became a very important part of the film. And so like I said, I don't want to give, you know, Dick, don't give away the ending. But that's stuff that you just kind of, so you have the vision, but then, you know, you have to be open to things happening along the way. The only one thing that I know we wanted to do that we just weren't able to do it is throughout the making of the film, we see Dick's process of making a painting from start to finish, and it's a painting of Aaron Judge. And I have kind of a loose connection to him that uh I thought we would be able to present it to him in the film, and that's what I really hope to be able to do that. I know Dick did as well. That's Dick's favorite current player. And we weren't able to present the painting to him. So we still hope to someday. So we just kind of keep putting it out there. So hopefully he'll hear about that and be like, "Hey, I want that painting." It's
something that I think he would want because it's his 62nd home run.
Yeah, yeah. So that's
I
the
mean,
only thing
that's
that
a
like I
milestone.
wanted to do that we didn't get to do.
Right. I think he'll like it.
Yeah. What about you, Dick?
Regarding my art in the film, I don't.
Or just the how closely does it resemble kind of when I first called you and we started talking about making a movie together? Is it kind of what you had in mind?
Yeah. I think you had in mind what I had in mind, but it was just not going to be a story about me, but about the game, and that should be a big part of it because there are so many people who love the game, and so you know, if I get back to doing art, I have done it so long and so much, I can pretty well assume that it's going to turn out all right. So that at the speed that I work when we're doing this movie to get these things done that you and I were doing, I knew that I had to work fast and I didn't have to do anything over. And that's a big plus when you have a lot of work to do, and which I've had, fortunately, my whole entire career. And one of the things that I strive for, even though I have a great amount of respect for photography, I want my paintings to look like a painting, not a photograph. The worst thing you can say to me is that, boy, that looks just like a photograph, because it's got to be something that is new to the person, something that they haven't seen before. And that's the joy. A lot of paintings that I do, I use variety of photographs to do one image. A head from somebody, a body from somebody, a background from somebody, equipment from somebody. And that's also fun, locating those things. Now that we have computers, I mean, I have about 450 baseball books that I did before they started putting all this imagery in computers. Now I got to get rid of the books because I need space. But anyway, you know, I'm always. I don't want to sound arrogant about this, but I'm always happy with what I've done. I don't think
that doesn't sound arrogant. That sounds like being blessed with the joy of taking your craft and putting that joy out into the world for other people. It doesn't sound arrogant at all to me.
Yeah, the experience that I've had with it did so much for me.
Everybody on this call too is getting a sneak peek at Dick's most recent painting behind him, Scott Rowland there, which will be going to Citizens Bank Ballpark to join the rest of his Philadelphia A's, Phillies, and Philadelphia area Hall of Famers that they have there, which there's a little bit of that featured in the movie too, a permanent exhibit of work. And Scott Rowland there is just finishing drawing behind him there, and will be in Philadelphia.
Well,
Mark, it's like,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Dick, go.
The thing about these paintings that I've done, when the Phillies built their new ballpark, they wanted to dedicate a section of the ballpark to Phillies Hall of Famers, A's Hall of Famers, Philadelphia A's Hall of Famers, and people like Reggie Jackson, Don Lasorda, these people who were born in and around Philadelphia area. And they wanted me to do these little portraits that they would hang. And I'm still going to say, well, what? I said, you have a team that started back in the 1800s. You different uniforms, different signage, different ballparks, different fans, different uniforms. This is a way to really to do this project and illustrate a history of the game just by your players that have achieved. I think would be. I mean, it would cost a lot more money, but I think it's better than putting little heads on there on the wall. And they love that idea, and so when they've added new players, which in this case would be nothing but Phillies, Richie Allen, which has already been done and it's there, and Scott Rowland. And they're like 30 by 40. They're framed. I have them behind me, and I think the promo.
Yeah, one of the main images for the film, you're standing in front of
I'm standing in front of these paintings that show these wonderful old uniforms and stands and signage of products that don't exist anymore. I made sure that because in the 30s and 20s and 30s, that was a big advertising space. And products that, like I said, you don't see anymore.
Yeah, even though the baseball stadium and even the smaller parks, that the walls are plastered with advertising, it's not the same. Just there's something, you can see it in that the first night game at Ebbets Field. I mean, or any of images of that era, or paintings of that era. It's just the advertising used to be an art form in and of itself.
Right.
And no more. Now it's just, give me your money, give me your money. I mean, that was always the end goal before, but they're not even cool looking anymore.
No, that's why I wanted to get into graphic design, because art was a big art form. Advertising was a big art form. And I figured I don't think I have the ability to become a full-time illustrator, but I love design. I love type. I love photography and all the things, of the components that make up an ad or a brochure. And that's how I started.
Well, what I was going to say was that, Mark, it was like you read my mind, because what I was going to ask next, right before we get to Q&A, was, Dick, I know that you're constantly painting, and whether it be for, in the case of the Aaron Judge, there's a milestone moment, or somebody went into the Hall of Fame, but what's next or in progress for each of you in terms of projects?
Why don't you start?
For me, I've been working for a while now, really for a couple years almost. I mean, as I always like to have kind of a project a little bit later and one starting. So as Diamond King was winding down, I was also getting started on this project related to Bigfoot. And some of you may be familiar with the famous 1967 film footage of the Bigfoot walking, looks at camera. that is kind of, when we think of Bigfoot in pop culture, that's the Bigfoot. And there's really just a fascinating story of that whole film, the characters involved, the leading up to it, the aftermath. There's, betrayal and egos and all this stuff you want in your great, like, kind of traditional stories. So we have access to the families of the people that were involved with that, which have never told the true story. So I've been working on that, and we hope to finish that in the fall. It'll probably come out next year, but it's been a lot of fun. I've shared, bits and pieces with Dick along the way, and I think Dick's going to be the first person to buy that one when it comes out.
Absolutely.
What
And
about for you, Dick? Any surprises that you've got that you can share? Anything?
well, no, I was going to address the what's next for me.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that baseball is a distraction of everyday pain and life and what have you. That it just takes you into another place, into some paradise. And I've always felt, and I'm also a movie fan, so I've always felt that films were also a distraction. I'm a painter of distractions, is what I think I am. And I have started. My goal is to paint about 150 portraits of people who have played an important part in the film industry, from the silent movies until today, from Brad Pitt to Fairbanks, or even before that. And I've done about 50 of them. And then I would have an exhibit somehow, maybe in Hollywood or Palm Springs or whatever, and give the proceeds to a cause that is connected to the film industry, such as people who never made it or are down and out, and there are these people.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course the fires hit the field, the canyons in Los Angeles, and my daughter lives in one of them, and she was scared for her home. But there are also people who need money for that, to get by. So I don't know. So that's my hope. I will see what happens. I can pick and
sounds-
choose.
Yeah,
So,
it's really beautiful work. It's some of his best work. I've told him that, and I know there's an idea too to maybe do another book. I hope everybody here has Dick's book, The Immortals and the New Immortals, which is, I wasn't familiar with the book. I didn't know about the book. Sad to admit, until we started working on this project, he sent it to me, and I spent a week at my dining room table, just totally glued to this Immortals book. And so maybe there will be like a film Immortals version as well too, with these new paintings.
I look forward to that. If you've got a question for Marq or Dick, why don't you go down to the bottom of your screen there and hit the react button and raise your hand, and I'll start calling on people. If you're not comfortable asking on camera, please feel free to put your question in the comments and I will ask it on your behalf. Jason, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. So first thing, I just want to say for anybody in this audience who hasn't seen the film yet, do yourself a favor, spend the $3 or $4 to rent or the $10 or $12 to buy. It's just such a beautiful film. So you will not regret it. In fact, I am offering a money back guarantee. If you buy the film and you're not into it, let me know. Seriously, I'll buy it from you. But I have a stumper that I want to ask Dick. So
Ooh.
So I've written about 10 articles on the Diamond Kings over the last few weeks. And in really kind of going back to 1982, making my way into the 90s, what I figured out is probably the best player to play through the entire Diamond King era, but never get a Diamond King card was Dennis Eckersley. And so, Dick, I was going to ask if there was any reason for that, or if it's just you had a lot of other players and he just never quite came up.
well, first of all, Frank was the primary picker of the players because
Okay.
I'm painting them and he's researching them. He's keeping tabs on them. But then he would ask my opinion, and I would either agree or say, well, I don't know. I think I like this guy better. But Dennis never came up to his mind, I guess. It was totally totally not disrespect but I just think he kind of, I mean, he had a way of in his own head what would appeal. He had a thing about that, and he would pick a player. They had to be eligible. I mean, that is, they had to be the star. If they weren't having a good year when I was painting them, they had to have be the star of their team, even though, and recognizable. So he was thinking of the collectors. Everything he thought about when we did was about collectors, what they wanted to collect. And I think that one of the things he would look at a player and see if he was a future Hall of Famer, or if people out there would think he was a future Hall of Famer, and therefore make him viable and make him a worthy candidate for being a Diamond King. I don't think it was it might have been an oversight. I'm sure that, and he's not the only one. I'm sure there are others, and you'll probably dig them up and put them in your article.
Even though he didn't do it, Diamond King, I just put in the chat an image of Eckersley, Dick's painting from Dick's website, which I've always loved that painting of Dennis Eckersley. So if you click on that, you'll see the painting, but it also, will take you to Dick's site, which I would encourage you to explore because there are so many gems there. But I do love that Eckersley painting.
He was great to paint. He really was. I enjoyed painting him. He had a style, a look.
And for sure, I second what Mark said about going to that website. It's dickperez.com, and it is fascinating. You will go and go back and go back and go back. So Ryan, what you got?
Hey, I hope everybody's doing well tonight. This is actually really fantastic. Dick, thank you so much. I have a real quick question. So I have here a 1995 Donruss Diamond King. It's actually one of my favorite sets. And of all the Diamond Kings cards, I've actually noticed that the style of the 1995, I don't know if you guys can see that. The style of the 1995 Diamond Kings is really vastly different, I think, than any other set that you have done. Was there any reason for that? Do you know, or do you remember?
I'm always looking for a way. Again, I wanted to look like art, and I had by that point, I think by 95, I had run out of a lot of ways to present art. So I think that's, I just wanted to do something different. That you can do a portrait realistically and do things with color that is not logical, like, green shadows or whatever I did to some of those. And nobody complained, so I kept developing, new things. And I think the 95, is that the one that has Chili Davis?
Yeah, that's your favorite set too, Dick.
Yeah, that's my favorite set. That what you picked.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that somebody else in the world who like, you do like it, right?
I love it. Actually, you're a great inspiration for me as an artist. So
Really?
I always looked at your work, and I really wanted to kind of emulate what you have done. So I'm not as good as you, but
well, no, keep doing it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I have
Thank you so
done
much.
something similar to those before too. I mean, that weren't Diamond Kings, but I might have done an illustration here and there that used flat colors, no blending, everything just divided into two, shadow and light. And
it's very distinct.
Yeah, nothing in between. So
is one of the things that I think is cool when you talk about variety, Dick. If you look at, use Yogi Berra as an example, somebody that you've painted many, many times, and they all have their own unique identity. It's the same player, but it's not like, oh, it's another Yogi. It's like each it lives as its own, but if you look at them as a cohesive set, they have their own identity, but they work together as well.
Yeah. Yogi Berra,
I think-
Hank Bauer, Irvin Oren. The Yankees had one of the ugliest teams in the 50s. And I wasn't a painter then, but I did get an opportunity to paint a lot of those guys later in life. But Yogi was
Molly
a great
McClure. Oh,
subject.
sorry. Go ahead, Dick.
No, I said Yogi was a great subject, and he was a really nice person. And my memory of him is he would collect our sets, and he would be at Hall of Fame weekend getting him signed by his co-Hall of Famers, which is that was a delightful, to see.
It's like the ultimate compliment, right? To have somebody that's one of your subjects
Yeah.
going around and right.
Yeah.
And it makes those of us who are not superstars feel kind of okay when we see you in Geek Out, because we know that Yogi did it with your work with other people. Molly McClure.
Hello, Miss Donna. How are you tonight?
Hello, I'm well. How are you?
We're good. We're good. Dick and Mark, thank you so much for this beautiful presentation. Dick, I had a question for you about a preference. Do you prefer painting more in oil and acrylic, or do you prefer watercolors more?
Oils for sure. More forgiving. Acrylics dry too quickly. Your palette is already gone by the time you're halfway through the painting. You got to start all over. I mean, put a palette all over. Watercolor was the only thing that I did in the beginning. They had to get to the printer in time, so they dry quick. Not all the oils, you have to wait a while. And I remember there was a collector named Barry Halper, who was probably second to the Hall of Fame in his collection. And they have a room up there for him. And he bought a lot of my work, a lot of watercolor. And I had a show in New York one time, and he came, and he was a Yankee fan, so I painted a lot of Yankees, and he bought them all. And he said to me, have you ever painted in oils? And I said, no, it's just watercolor. And he said, well, you better start painting in oils. You really want to be an artist, you got to paint in oils. And I did. And I loved it. From the very beginning, it takes a little while to get used to it, but it's my favorite medium.
And is all your work done on canvas, or do you do it on board as well?
Yeah, on board, panel, canvas, watercolor paper. When it was watercolor, I really always sure they use good paper. Yeah, it's mainly canvas mounted on board, canvas on cardboard, canvas stretched, and panels, all kinds.
Well, thank you again. It was a lovely presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We had a question in the comments from Michael Ramos for Mark. He says, I'm a super fan of the annual congressional baseball game. There's a ton of history there, such as bipartisan friendships, hardcore fans, behind the scenes stuff, and even the Hall of Fame and the Library of Congress touch on this wonderful tradition. Would you consider ever filming a documentary on the congressional baseball game?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I was kind of reading that as it came in, and on my other screen here had to quickly look at, I mean, I'm vaguely familiar with it, but I know nothing about the history. So, but the way that Michael speaks about it, it immediately sparks thoughts of like, oh, you could actually make a really interesting, somewhat political film, not being political, but about politics and the two parties through a game of baseball, which could be a fascinating approach. So this research will stay up on this screen, and I'll be revisiting that here at a later date. It is fascinating.
Dixie Tarango, a man of many meetings. Glad to see you here tonight.
Thank you. Dick, great to meet you, even though it's on Zoom. Question about when you first started out, were there any artists whose the way they did things, their methods, influenced you at the very beginning?
Yeah, there were quite a few of them. I give a lot of credit to the football institution. They they produce some of the best programs and yearbooks and things like that. And they use top illustrators to do their work. Merv Corning, Bart Forbes, guys that you probably never heard of, but they inspired the heck out of me. And that was another, that's when you knew you can probably make a living out of doing sport art. Because I started out as a sport artist. I was doing football, basketball, I was doing other sports. And baseball just became the most collectible. I mean, the most collectible thing is baseball of all the sports. And it goes farther than most or all. And it became also a way to make a living.
Kind of along those same lines, but with a slightly different angle, from Jonah Weiss for you, Dick. He asked, do you have any artist or art movements that had a major influence on your work, technique, color, etc.? And how have these influences changed over time with your style?
Well, my teachers were John Singer Sargent and Anders Zorn from Norway. I mean, these are turn of the century kind of portraitists and painters who you knew you weren't looking at a photograph. And each brushstroke had a place that was perfect. And those were my teachers. I bought all their books, all their images and books. I looked at all the time and wanted to follow that trend. Today, there is more expressive portraiture. In other words, really going away from realism, so to speak. I mean, what you and I would call realism. You still know it's a face and it's a figure and it's recognizable. As long as you can suggest the look, the likeness of somebody, to me, that's okay. As long as it's something great to look at. And so illustration today and painting is becoming more expressive and almost combining abstract with realism. And it's fun to see. And I've been doing some of these Hollywood paintings that I'm doing. I kind of employing some of that technique.
The more you talk about these Hollywood paintings, the more I'm really excited to see them. We're at last question of the night, and then just a couple of closing reminders and comments from Mary Shea. Hi, Mary in Milwaukee. Will the movie be in theaters? I'll be seeing it at the Milwaukee Film Festival.
Yeah, that's very cool. It won't be in theaters as far as like, a theatrical run, but there will be some opportunities still to see it in a theater, like at some festivals. I'm not really at this point, since the movie's out now digitally, that's our main focus is making people aware of that. And so I'm not really submitting to any additional film festivals or anything like that. But Milwaukee is a festival I love. My previous films have played there. I think it's just a great festival. They asked to screen the movie, and I said, of course. So there's actually a screening. Mary, hopefully you're out there next Friday, because I will be at that one. And then I think there's a second screening as well too, a couple days later. So there may be some other opportunities. Even today, I talked to somebody at the Louisville Slugger Museum that and we're potentially going to do. I don't think Dick and I would be able to travel to that, but to have a screening for the audience there. They have a theater, so there might be some of these other opportunities as well. But not in theaters necessarily. So best place to watch it, other than that, if you're not in Milwaukee, is Amazon, Apple, Google Play, Kinema. And some of these questions too, from Ryan and Jonah. I'm like, oh, I love the scene in the movie that covers that. So if you haven't seen it and you want to know a little bit more about the questions, that you asked, there's a little bit more in the film as well.
Yeah. Yes, definitely see the movie. You will not regret it. Nobody is going to be reaching out to Jason for their money back. As a matter of fact, everybody's going to be recommending it to other people. So remember, Apple, Amazon, Kinema, Google Play. Also, there is some merchandise available at thediamondkingmovie.com. There's Mark, what's left? There's some card sets, some posters.
Yeah,
and
yeah. The poster. So that is the best place to the one-stop shop to go is the diamondkingmovie.com. So right on the front page there now is all the information about where to watch the movie. You can click a link, it'll take you to the platform, the contest, things like that. I guess it's a little bit different though, Donna, for SABR because we're making some exclusive, prints available.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then we have a shop where the official poster, as well as still some of the poster that Donna made that's behind her for the SABR convention. That was a exclusive for that event, but we still have some of those left. And some postcards as well too, I think are on there. And then you can pre-order the Blu-ray, which will be a little bit later in the year probably.
Yeah, so please support living artists, please. It's important. Thank you both very, very, very much for taking the time to be here with us tonight. Before I just remind everybody about the next meeting, any final thoughts from either of you?
No, thanks for having us. It's always
Okay.
fun spending time with you, Donna, and great to see a couple familiar faces of Jason, and got to meet a few of you in Minneapolis as well too. So thanks for having us, and it was a lot of fun.
Right. Thank you. It is an absolute honor to have both of you here. We will be back together again on Tuesday, May 13th, when our guest will be Lisa Doris Alexander with an encore of her 2024 Jerry Malloy Negro Leagues Conference presentation, Black Baseball in a League of Their Own series. I got to see it in Cooperstown. It's a very interesting conversation. And I encourage you all to join us. It's always a fun time. Thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, everybody, thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody.